Chris Walker, how you doing today?
Kyle, great to be here. Thanks for having me. Sorry for the technical issues, everyone. We're starting about 5 minutes late, but we're going to make this action-packed.
We sure are. We're talking about a very important topic today that's top of mind for every executive, every marketer, every salesperson that I know, which is how can you eliminate go-to-market bloat and improve customer acquisition cost? I saw some crazy stat that customer acquisition cost in B2B has tripled in the last 15 years. And there's no real sign of that abating. And solving this is just completely fundamental to companies being attractive to investors, public or private, to be useful companies for employees to work at it and gain equity and all the rest. So we're going to get into CAC super deep. But first, for those who don't know you, Chris, say hello. Who are you? What do you do?
What's up, everyone? My name is Chris Walker. For those of you that don't know me, I've been in B2B, both as a marketer, a sales professional, in operations, supply chain, manufacturing, engineering, product management. I've been all over B2B companies since 2012. I started my first company, Refine Labs, off of the core insight that in 2018, 19, 20, 2021, that B2B companies, the biggest issue inside of their go-to-market that was that marketing was not being effective, therefore making it very hard for sales to sell. Luckily, during that time, there was a big wave of companies printing money and 0% interest rates. And so the lack of marketing effectiveness didn't matter at that point because everyone was buying things. And then boom, economy slows down. I started my second company recently, Paceto, which is focused on optimizing the entire go-to-market using what we call signals. Because at the moment, B2B companies, customer acquisition costs are so high, go-to-market bloat is so high, and executives need the right data in order to be able to make decisions about how to both reduce costs and to increase productivity and effectiveness of the entire go-to-market team, not just a department of marketing or we need our SDRs to perform a little bit better. We're out of the incremental of we need our SDR connect rates to go up by 0.5%. We need our cost per lead to go down by $5. That type of stuff isn't going to get it done anymore.
We're going to dive into that incremental concept here in a minute, but let's focus on where you started, which is you have this headline and this drum that you've been beating for as many years as I've been following you, Chris, which is marketers are not spending money efficiently. And there are so many downstream problems that causes. But if we stay at the highest level, at the executive level, the main problem is you're spending way too much money to acquire customers. And it's a unsustainable business model, especially now when money is not cheap. And so why is this happening? Like, what are you seeing that's so inefficient or ineffective in the way that most marketing teams are marketing?
I think step one is in the planning process across the entire go-to-market. So how do you even set how much you should be spending on sales and marketing? I think was set based on benchmarks in the growth at all costs era, where most tech B2B SaaS companies will still spend 50% or more of revenues on sales and marketing to acquire customers. There's some statistics out there where companies that are public companies growing at less than 25% at that type of spend range will have somewhere between a 36 and a 60-month CAC payback period, which means that, at worst, it's taking more than 5 years to pay back the cost of acquiring one customer. And then you have to hope that you can even keep that customer for 5 years before you even break even on it. Secondarily, I believe that most of the marketing analytics tools that have been developed so far have been built to help marketing prove the ROI of what they're doing, therefore being biased to try and show that it's working, not to have analytics to show that things are not working, which leaves executives, both the CFO, CEO, the chief marketing officer as well, and even the downstream individual contributors and team leaders to not be aware of where they're spending money at a very low efficiency. And so at Paceto, we're working on new solutions that come in with the mindset of first trying to prove that things are not working, which creates an entirely different view of how you look at the data.
That 50% of revenue being spent on sales and marketing, that 5-year payback period, I'm going to ask you for some benchmarks. Like, what should it be? And I know it's going to be different by industry and by segment and all the rest, but do you have a sense? Can you give the audience a sense of kind of what they should be aiming at? What does good actually look like here?
Well, those are the benchmarks. Those were the benchmarks that were created in the growth at all costs era. If you look at public companies, sales and marketing percent of spend on percent of revenue will be somewhere between 35% for a company that's declining in revenue, so growing less than 0% year over year. And for the highest growth public SaaS companies, 25 to 50% annual growth, that's hundreds of millions of dollars of growth every year, will be spending about 50% of revenues on sales and marketing. So somewhere in that range of 35 to 50% of revenues. I'm starting to come to the conclusion that budgeting for your sales and marketing expenditures as a percentage of revenue in a recurring SaaS business is a terrible way to decide how much to spend on sales and marketing. And I think budgeting as a percentage of net new ARR would be a much more fiscally responsible way to decide how much you spend on sales and marketing. If you look all the way back, CAC payback periods and things like that were originally determined based on direct to consumer e-commerce business models where you're going to run performance marketing. You're trying to get a customer for $40. You hope that they stay and reorder for 5 months, and therefore you pay $40 to get the customer. You get $120 back. You get a 3-to-1 CAC LTV, and the math works. We've analyzed, or I've personally analyzed, more than 50 private SaaS companies. So that was public company SaaS data. In the private companies, I find the data is even worse, that on average, companies are somewhere between a 48 to a 60-month or more CAC payback period when you add in sales headcount, tech and tools, SDR expenses, account management, customer success, onboarding managers, marketing headcount, all the marketing programs, the over specialization of roles inside of specifically B2B tech companies just creates so much bloat in their go-to-market where it's fundamentally impossible to achieve an appropriate ROI. And even the best companies that we analyze are in the range somewhere between 18 and 36 months, which I think is still leaves room to be desired. I think in a really efficient SaaS go-to-market, right, you have very high gross margins, you have very high revenue multiples outside, like unlike other industries. So I think targeting somewhere, like I think best practice would be under 24 months. I think if you're at around 12 months, you might it might be an indicator that you should be spending more to grow more.
Interesting.
Somewhere in
Okay,
that
that's
range, 12 to 24 total.
really useful.
So
12 to 24. And
so companies got to
aspirational.
cut by somewhere between 50 and 67%.
And we'll talk about strategies to do that because as you've mentioned a couple times now, the incremental strategies are not going to get you there. But I want to dig in on this concept of go-to-market bloat. And again, it's something that you've been talking about for a long time, and you just mentioned it again with the hyper specialization that's crept into go-to-market teams. And so the way that we think about go-to-market bloat and the way that we hear a lot of customers talk about it is they'll say, we have all of these tools, we have application sprawl, it's out of control. We have all these specialists that have their own sets of tools. And then we have all these processes that everybody is trying to run, and all of those things are in silos, and it creates all of this data, and we're getting no value out of the data that we create. And so go to market bloat is this kind of accumulation of all these investments that you've made, people, process, technology, without actually getting any sort of results, return on that investment. And that's what's leading to all these issues. I'm curious to hear how you define go to market bloat, how you're thinking about the problem.
Yeah, very similar to how the way that you're thinking about it. I think a combination of too many tools. Like, do you need all 7 of those tools, or would one be okay? Do you need 50 people on your marketing team, or would 20 be okay, or would 8 be okay? Some could argue that smaller teams or hyper talented people would be far more effective at 8 people than 50 people.
Yeah.
At my company, Refine Labs, we had a 3-person marketing team and generated more than $10 million in net new business and had a CAC payback period of less than 2 months.
Wow.
Did you really need to double your sales headcount last year and cut your territories in half and not get the appropriate return back because you used a reverse sales headcount model to determine how much revenue you generate? Did you really need to hire that outsourced SDR firm that you pay $100,000 a month for how many meetings they get for you? And I think over and over that in the growth at all costs era, it was let's do anything that we can. And even if it only gets us one customer and it costs us way too much money, we got one more customer. Let's just do it. And I think there's been a fundamental shift in the market driven purely through the revenue multiples that SaaS companies get that used to be 50 to 20 to 100x that are now 4 to 8x, maybe 12 at the highest. And that pressure that it puts on revenue multiples puts a huge pressure on the company's EBITDA profiles and how investors are going to value them and things like that. And sales and marketing expenses are the biggest expense that companies have in tech companies have in their entire company, almost double or triple what they spend on product development and R&D. And so where's the first place that you need to look if you're trying to improve EBITDA margin and hit rule of 40 or even exceed rule of 50? Like sales and marketing expenditures become the number one place to go outside of, over bloated HR expenses and, some of these other things that you can take micro cuts on, but it's not going to get you all the way there. Additionally, when the economy slows down and customers are buying less, it puts a lot of pressure on how much net new business that you acquire, slows down your growth rate. So, NRR goes down. NRR is going down for almost every public company over the past 2 years. Net new revenues are going down for almost every public company. And therefore, your growth rate's going down. So let's say you used to be growing at 50%. So then to hit rule of 40, you could be negative 10 EBITDA. Now your growth rate's compressing to 15%. Now all of a sudden you need to go from negative 10% EBITDA to 25% EBITDA. That's a 35% delta. If you're a $100 million company, you got to figure out how to put $35 million back on the bottom line. That is not so simple.
No, it is not. And so let's talk about this now. This concept of incrementalism that you have, saying, hey, you can't just write a better subject line in your outbound email sequence and expect that to completely change the game here. You need to go back to first principles. And instead of thinking about things through an incremental lens, maybe we need to all inject ourselves with a little Frank Slootman here and go more transformational and tear some things down and build them back up in a way that makes sense now for the current environment. And it sounds like I'm curious to get your you've given us a little bit, but let's get a bit more on what got us here, what got us to this kind of assembly line way of thinking about the go-to-market engine. And then we'll talk about how to break the cycle. So what got us here and where do we go from here?
Yeah, fundamentally, the growth, the revenue models that companies use, the demand waterfall model that goes, we need a lead, then we get an MQL, then hopefully we get a meeting that becomes an SQL, and then it becomes an SQO, and then sales will qualify those, and then breaking those processes down by department so that marketing is responsible for MQLs, and SDRs are responsible for getting MQLs to become SQLs, and then sales are responsible for converting all of those SQOs. What it leads to is each individual department optimizing around their specific part of the process. And what we need and what we don't have is some overarching view, go to market strategy, go to market analytics that's looking at the entire process and optimizing around it. I spent the first 5 years of my career in manufacturing facilities and doing lean process optimization and Six Sigma, where you have to figure out how do we manufacture 1 million parts a year? How do we deliver it on time to customers? How do we not have too much inventory? How do we optimize one part of the process so it saves us 4 minutes of time so we increase our output by this? And you have to be able to look at that as an overall system and not just in each individual part. And so when we have this department level silos, we have each individual team saying, oh, we need to change our subject line so our open rates go up by 2%, and marketing saying we need to get our MQLs from $160 per MQL to $147 per MQL, and sales saying we need to try and reduce our sales cycle by 2 days, and we need to be able to get our win rate from 18% to 20%. And when you do that, sure, you make little bumps, you can make little improvements, but when you need to put 35% EBITDA in the bottom line over the next 12 to 18 months, it's just not going to get you there. It's going to get you 2 points. It's going to get you 1%. And so I do agree that at some point you have to think about, is the machine that we run in our go-to-market the right machine anymore? Is the
Right.
predictable revenue model that we adopted in 2009 and we started scaling in 2012 still the best thing that we could do? Is the demand waterfall model that got published in 2007 still how we should run our go-to-market despite how much the world has changed? And sure, there's been new technology that allows us to make an MQA instead of an MQL, and there's been new technology and new vendors to help us get leads for cheaper and to automate our lead gen programs. And so there's new tools that make it feel like we're doing something new and innovative, but it's really all built on the same old machine.
So how do we break the cycle, Chris? Where do you see companies that have shed the incremental thinking, that have shed the old playbooks that are totally outdated? What are they doing that is so different, that is truly innovative, that is going to help them flip the script?
So the first thing from my perspective, I'm going to present more on this later this afternoon, is to fundamentally change how you run your financial model in your company. I'm having an executive level this is a CEO, CFO level conversation. And you say, okay, instead of spending 50% of revenue on sales and marketing and just saying that's how much we're going to spend and we hope we get a return on it, say how much should we spend if we want to achieve a 24-month CAC payback across our entire go-to-market that allows us to have 20% EBITDA growth. And when you do that, what it leads you to say is, okay, what we're doing right now, there's no fucking way we're going to get to where we need to go. When you just change that one dynamic, and then it
Right.
forces you to think differently about how we're doing this. And then you ask certain questions like the things that I mentioned. Do we need all 7 tools or do we need one? Do we need an SDR team or could we automate it with AI? Do we need 100 reps or should we just take our top 50% performers and cut our sales team in half? Do we need to spend $1 million a month on Google ads, or could we get the same return for 100K, which by the way, almost every company could. And so I think those are the questions that we need to be asking. Those are the transformational questions that don't get forced to be asked when we budget against a percentage of revenue for sales and marketing.
That's a really interesting way to start, kind of inverting the problem and starting with what you aspire to achieve as opposed to starting with the money that you have. It makes perfect sense. And it's not terribly surprising that marketing teams don't do this, sales teams don't do this because it fundamentally will limit their capacity. It will limit their budget. It'll limit the number of hires you can make. And so many sales and marketing teams are not obsessed, but focused on kind of building empires and doing a little bit of a measuring tape game just based on how many people do we have on our team or how many sellers do I have, how many managers do I have, and that used to be kind of a mark of leadership was, oh, I manage 100 people, I've made it. And you've got to think differently. If that is your bar for success, there's no way that you can make it, especially when there are so many paradigm changing technologies out there. You mentioned I can scale my outbound program, I can scale my ABM program with AI instead of with a cohort of 20 people inside my company. And so get us down to the tactical level, Chris, whether you want to talk about ad optimization or you want to talk about process automation or what are you seeing people do tactically to execute this new game plan?
Yeah, so first off, this is for everybody. Like I fell into the same trap of thinking that having more people that worked at my company was the measure of success. And maybe it was back in the day. Maybe it wasn't wrong. Maybe that's how it should have been. But now as the things have changed, what really matters is my company profitable? Am
Yes.
I driving and increase enterprise value both for the owners and our investors and our shareholders, including all the people that work at our company that have stock options? And those now become the core metrics of success, which is very different than how many people do I have on my team. When we think about tactically, and when we analyze a lot of the companies inside of their data, um, some of the things that the great companies are doing. One is, and you can't really change. Well, you can strategically, but it's hard to change. Is your market. Companies that operate in a strong market, like cybersecurity companies, typically have significantly lower cost, sales and marketing costs and CAC payback periods than a company that is in HR technology right now.
Mm.
And so part of it is your market and your company strategy, which I agree is hard to change. But I think it's important to call that out because that's the number one factor that we see in CAC payback period anecdotal trends is the market. Um, when we get into the tactics, companies just dramatically overspend on marketing everything, marketing headcount and programs. Programs are easier to change and they're easier to measure. So let's focus there. Companies overspend on Google ads. Will typically recommend somewhere between a 60 and 80% cut to Google ad spend. And sometimes we'll recommend 100% cut. Um, yeah, just because the math doesn't make sense. So that's like, it's one big thing that many B2B marketers think, oh, the number one place I'm going to put my money is Google ads. And it becomes the number one variable line item. I think that really needs to be challenged in this era. Um,
Let's talk about the math real quick. Chris, you said the
yeah.
math doesn't make sense. Just put a fine point on that. You mean CAC to LTV?
Yeah, with a Google ad, you can whether you use a W-shaped model or a direct like click to cash type of model, either way, the math doesn't make sense. Where if you buy a non-branded term like AI for sales automation or AI platform that doesn't have a branded term in it, the average CAC payback period is somewhere between 60 and 120 months when you add up the advertising and then all the other downstream expenses. And so when you isolate certain programs, especially ones that are incredibly easy to measure against revenue, like Google ads, that stuff doesn't make sense. And then even when you look at the branded terms, like somebody goes to Google and searches your brand, we're seeing on average a high performer would have a 36-month total CAC payback on someone that goes to Google and searches their brand, which to me is totally untenable. And many small companies that are smart and have innovative leaders are saying, okay, like we just can't spend there. We're going to figure out how to get someone to search our brand and click on our organic link. And if we lose 2 customers because of it, then so be it. And I think that's a really interesting debate that a lot of companies should be having. Another trend that I'm seeing, which is very interesting, and this has been supported with public SaaS company data, is that there are companies that run what we call a dual motion. So that inside their website, they'll have two paths. You can get a demo with sales, or you can go into a free trial. And the companies that run the dual motion and get at least 30% of revenue from both motions have the highest CAC payback periods out of anyone. So companies that just have sales or just have PLG have significantly lower CAC payback periods than companies that run both at the same time. We see that validated inside of all the private companies that we analyze. And for several companies, we've been recommending that they shut off their free trial PLG engine. And we've made that recommendation. I think I've made that 4 times out of 40 companies that we've analyzed, and not all of them have the dual motion. So I'm starting to see a pattern in that in the data. And what
Why is
happens,
that? Yeah, why is that?
because when a customer is presented with both options, they'll take the path of least resistance. So 90% of the existing demand will flow into the free trial and not into sales. And when it flows into the free trial, what we find in the data, anecdotal, not enough large scale, but anecdotes, 4 times longer from when they fill out that form to when they become a customer. So if your sales team takes 60 days to close, if they go through a PLG free trial motion, it'll take you 240 days to get that revenue, 4 times longer. The conversion rate from form fill to customer is almost 100, somewhere between 10 and 100 times less. So if you win a demo form at 5%, you win a free trial at 0.5% or less. And those two things compound where your sales team could be having 9x more meetings, but instead you have a bunch of people running into this free trial hoping that you're going to get it. So in the growth at all costs era, companies like an early stage company could get valued on how many free trial signups they get per month.
Mhm.
No conversion, no revenue, no sales data. And that type of stuff doesn't happen anymore. And so another thing is companies having to make choices around, do we really need a PLG offer? Did we just do it because it seemed hot and cool and our investors thought it would be nice, or our CEO thought it would be cool? Because inside the data for many companies, I don't see it making sense, even inside of public companies as well. It's not just startups. So that's an interesting trend that I think people should consider and look at their own data and look at the difference in, form fill to close. We do that with our signal analytics, and also the win rates and conversion rates between the two paths. Um, I think that many companies are challenging the SDR function overall. Our findings in a lot of data is that having some type of independent sales prospecting motion delivers revenue. In our data, somewhere between 15 and 30% of revenue for a company on average will come from independent sales prospecting that doesn't come from a marketing MQL or from a partner or something like that. However, companies spend way too much money to go and get that 15 to 30% of revenue, and it's highly inefficient. So I think that AI has a lot of promise in being able to compress the cost that it takes to be able to go and get that revenue. So I think the conversation is not we should shut off outbound prospecting. I think it's we need to make outbound prospecting 10x more efficient.
Yeah.
And that's the conversation there. A lot of companies questioning their SDR function overall. I've been questioning the SDR function since 2017 because, believe it or not, the data was just as bad in 2017. Just no one had the pressure to look at it and nobody cared.
Yeah.
So I've been seeing that for a very long time. And I think that companies really need to scrutinize the amount of sales resources they have overall and the specialization, because now we have an AE, we have an SDR, we have a solutions consultant, we have an onboarding manager, we have a CSM, and we have an AM just to take care of one customer.
It's crazy.
And the math just doesn't math. And so if you look back in the day when I grew up in B2B, you had one AE. The AE did prospecting, closing, onboarding, account management, expansion and upsell, owned a book of business. It creates a whole, and then if you're in a good comp model, they get paid on their book of business. And so what happens? You retain salespeople for a lot fucking longer than the churn and burn that we see in SaaS companies because of how the comp plan is created. And those AEs have so much more discipline in closing the right customers and setting the right expectations and taking care of them and following up with them and making sure they're successful than the over specialization that we see today. So I think the companies will challenge how they've over specialized in the function across the customer journey in sales and account management, because I think it's better for the customer and better for the company. And then lastly, in marketing, B2B companies refuse to do anything that they can't measure. Meanwhile, all the things that they can measure perform terribly, and they just keep doing the things that they can measure. And so things like influencer marketing, starting a podcast, social media advertising that's not based on a conversion, connected TV advertising not based on a conversion, organic social media, thought leadership that's not around an ebook download or some type of gated
Right.
content. And community, dark social, all of those elements where buyers are actually getting information and actually making decisions, and what's driving people to buy are not where B2B companies are focused. Therefore, all the money is getting spent in other places that are less effective.
It's really
And
interesting.
last point, just to recognize as a CMO and a marketing leader that if your marketing CAC payback is 30 months, and to know that your sales and SDR expenses are going to add on to that, so it's at least 60 months, that to know as a marketing leader that there are inside of your 30-month CAC payback for your marketing expenditures, that there are a lot of investments in there that are at 5 months, and there are other investments that are at 100 months. And you need to go and figure out, it's not like people with multi-touch attribution think, oh, it's like, it's the mix of all the things that's going to really make it. But no, like there are things that really don't work that you spend money on. And there are things that really work that you spend money on, and trying to isolate what are the things that really work. And it's interesting because the things that really work that have a lower CAC payback period are typically the things that don't cost a lot of money. They
It's
take
very interesting.
skill, they take customer focus, they take
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
Well, they take real strategy, Chris, and this is the
exactly.
way that I'm thinking about things. You challenge a lot of things that are near and dear to my heart. I came through SaaS building SDR teams, and I love a lot about the SDR function and the foundational sort of skill set that it gives people on the entry level, or sort of the inroad to tech that it provides so many
Yeah.
people. But I think the SDR role is going away for the exact reasons that you talked about. It's this over specialization that just doesn't make sense anymore. It's not economically viable. Do I think outbound is going away? No. But I think the
Hmm.
specialized SDR role is going to fundamentally evolve. So, and part of the reason is because we have AI now that can do so many of the extremely time consuming tasks that an SDR was tasked with doing 6 months ago, a year ago. Account research, lead research, email writing, all of these things can be pretty much automated. Now,
Hmm.
the important part here, and what I want to be really clear about, is that all of these things that we talked about, if you're going to automate them with AI or optimize them with AI, there still needs to be some sort of strategic thinker that's setting the ship in the right direction. You can't just outsource your outbound motion to an AI company and be like, okay, my work here is done. That's not going to be effective. You need to make sure that you're targeting the right accounts, the right people at those accounts, that you have the right market, you have the right message, you have the right positioning, you have the right supporting content, you're running the right events. This go to market machinery needs to be much more coalesced than it's been in the past. It's been so siloed in the past where the buyer experience became really fragmented. I go to somebody's website and I'm getting somebody's outbound email, and the two are completely disconnected. And then I take that first call with the salesperson and I'm getting a third type of messaging that's totally disconnected. Like, what is going on here? And so you got to make sure that you can't outsource strategy, and you can't just kick strategy down the road. The way that we're building our team, our marketing team here at Copy AI, is we're hiring strategic thinkers that are kind of our pillars for all these different functional areas that we have. And then the execution of their strategy, we're outsourcing as much of that to our own product as we possibly can. So we have a team of 4 marketers that have launched a new category, launched a new website, launched a new microsite, publishing 2 SEO content pieces a day, publishing 1 thought leadership piece a day. And it's all from the strategies that they create executed by AI. And so I'm hopeful that more marketing teams can find more efficiencies with AI. I'm curious to hear how much experience or exposure you've got to those AI strategies.
Yeah. Well, first off, I think that smaller teams is going to be a way of the future. One, because it's more economically viable, but also less overhead, less meetings, less management layers, less communication layers, less specialized technology. Typically, you're going to get better people when you have a smaller team. And so I think there will be a move to have smaller teams for all of those different reasons. I remember back in the day in like 2020, I had a post, it was one of my best performing LinkedIn posts about here's how a 3-person marketing team creates more content than every $100 million company in the world.
Yeah,
And that was me back in the day. You don't need a lot of resources. You need a great strategy. We weren't outsourcing with AI at that point, but we used outsourced resources, offshoring and things like that. Offshoring is kind of like the middle ground on the way to AI.
right.
Um, AI is picking up in our content post production. So the firm that we use, Hatch, which I'm a shareholder in as well, uses AI to automate a lot of the processes and speed that up. But there's still a human at the end saying, "Is this the right message? Did we cut the right hook? what should the caption be? So there needs to be a human layer still on top of it, to your point. I think that a lot of the stuff related to data, like going out and getting data, putting it in the right place, writing emails, optimizing those emails, looking at the data to be able to make decisions. I think most of that can be done by AI today, which is being done very poorly by humans, if you ask me. I think that speed becomes another big thing. I think,
Yep.
right, it's like, oh, we couldn't send our, highest quality demo requests to our AEs because they weren't going to follow up in time because they're in demos all day. So let's give it to an SDR. I think that a lot of those preconceived assumptions around time go away when you use AI to be able to execute things really quickly for your customer. And so I think there's a lot of advantages here, specifically on outbound. You get marketing, content writing, being able to go back to my library of 501 podcasts. This will be my 501st podcast recording today, to go back in that library and pump out 1,000 high quality blogs on different topics based on all the transcripts that are written there that could never be done by humans before, or at least not in a timely or efficient manner. So I think in content, there's a huge thing. But in content, you have to have the thoughts first. I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to content marketing is you can't just go to AI and say, write me a blog about how to be a CFO. You need to have the perspective. You need to have the customer insights. You need to have the expertise to be able to produce that ideally in audio and video content, and then be able to use AI to take that and make it into a bunch of different written formats. So I think there's a huge promise in content, a huge promise in outbound prospecting, huge promise in data management and getting going out and doing research and putting data in the right places as well.
So we see you've mentioned it's kind of how sales roles are likely to change, and I agree. And I think there's going to be an evolution, sort of ironically, kind of back to where we were 25 or 30 years ago, which is inside sales teams, outside sales teams that own the entire life cycle from prospecting through close, through retention and expansion. I see that evolution happening pretty soon. I think that won't kill entry level sales roles. It just means that entry level sales roles will actually be full sales roles that will involve closing. That's a good thing, I think, for a lot of junior sellers. What changes do you see, or what evolutions do you see for marketing roles? How do you think we kind of can unpack this over specialization that has crept into marketing teams?
So I think the number one thing that marketing teams are lacking is the right data to make decisions and the right foundation around what are the right KPIs and guardrails that we should be hitting in order to make decisions. I consult on this all the time where like they have a media buyer that's optimizing for cost per conversion. And then so the media buyers, oh, it's $48 per conversion. Everything's good. I'm going to keep running this machine. And then over on the other side, sales is converting those into meetings at 0.1%. And the media buyers saying, oh, well, it's sales fault. They should be converting people better. And in reality, it's because their fucking metrics are wrong and pushing them in the wrong direction. And so I think that before we think about anything related to AI and marketing, we need to completely rethink the data and the
Mm,
KPIs that we measure and the guardrails that we use. Because right now, there's AI out there that'll run Facebook ads for you and optimize against cost per lead and get you a lead at whatever cost that you want. But that doesn't equal revenue. It doesn't equal efficiency for your go to market. It doesn't equal efficiency for your sales team. It needs to be optimized around the right things. So I think that's the number one takeaway. And then from there, I think if the KPIs were set right and we had the right data layer, that a majority of the advertising that happens could be optimized and run through AI. Make 20 versions of this creative advertisement, change the messaging, change the copy, change the color, change the button, do all these different things, and then be able to measure and optimize which is the best performing creative, what are the right audiences to do. Facebook advertising already does this based on all the data that they have. And Facebook ads, in my belief, Facebook and Instagram and the Meta platform broadly is the most powerful advertising platform on the planet because of the data layer that they have with the Facebook Insights tag, pixel put everywhere, in addition to the fact that they have all the data for basically every person that visits every website. So you can see if you go and try and go buy a hotel, what are all the advertisings you get right after that?
yep.
You get all these different hotel advertisements from all these different vendors because they know that you're in market to go and buy a hotel. And so while B2B companies continue to buy intent data from Trust Radius and Bambora, I still believe that the Facebook intent data, proprietary intent data, is the most powerful intent data on the planet, in addition to first party website data. Um, Content, I think that the root cause of content historically has been we don't have expertise and we don't have insights into what our customer actually wants, and we don't have a feedback loop for our customers telling us what they want and what they like. I think that problem still exists in the new world with AI, that we need to have those fundamental strategies in order for our content to be effective. If we have those things, then I think AI unlocks this production volume and production quality and speed that's unmatched by humans. I think is uh, very impactful. But if you can see the trend of what I'm talking about, there's a foundational layer. Some you could call it strategy, you could call it just foundation of having the right data, the right KPIs, the right customer segmentation, the right customer insights, the right expertise. Those things are not going to be automated by AI.
Right.
So you need those things first, and then when you put AI on top of it, you're going to have a exponential increase to the production that you have from that foundation.
It's really well said, Chris. And I think the reason that most marketing teams, marketing leaders in particular, don't do this is because it's hard and it takes time. It's hard to go and spend half your time with customers to get those customer insights to actually understand your positioning and the messaging and the jobs that are being done and all those things. It takes time to do that. It's way easier as a marketing leader to just go and spend 100K on Facebook ads or on Google ads.
Google
And
Ads.
so I think that marketing teams and part of the reason, and it's not to say that all marketing people are dumb. I don't mean that at all. There's a lot of pressure for the wrong type of performance that comes
Mhm.
from CEOs and from CFOs and from sales leaders. And so there's this sort of vicious cycle that exists where the playbooks that these other executives are familiar with are the wrong playbooks that force the wrong behavior that take up the time that marketing people actually need to develop the strategy. So it's super interesting. I'm interested to see the way out.
Yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning, I think the way out is at the C-level executive team running a different version of one financial performance and the guardrails around financial performance, which then drive you to think differently about everything downstream. I think that's what we need because we can't leave it up to our Google Ads manager or our director of product marketing or our SDR manager to drive a transformational change inside of a company. This has to go C-level down.
Top.
And so at some point, the financial pressures will drive people to think, okay, the incremental is done. We need to be transformational. I think that's coming soon. You can see there's companies that are going out of business left and right now. Can't raise money, shutting down operations, laying off their whole staff, no severances because they don't have any money. Customers lose access the next day with no notice. Stuff like that's happening right now. And so I think that, and many companies where 3 years ago, an employee's stock options that they had were worth $1 million, and today they're literally worth $0, which is sad for a lot of employees. And so I think that's going to hopefully drive some different level of thinking at the executive level.
I want to do a quick shout out to my friend Chris Lockhead, who is one of the co-authors of a book called Play Bigger, and he's now another co-author of a Substack called Category Pirates. And they have this paradigm of this magic triangle that exists for executives to think through. And all of these things are in service and in support of one another. One of the legs of the triangle is your company strategy. So to sort of summarize what you said, Chris, that's the market that you're in. It's the financial model that you agree to and align on. It's all those things that are driving like company strategic decisions. The next leg is your category strategy. So, how are you positioning? What is your point of view? What problems are you solving? What category are you creating? And you need to be really sharp about that and differentiated about that so that you can actually make meaningful noise in the market and change people's way of thinking about the problems that they're solving. And then the final leg of the triangle is your product strategy. Your product has to actually pay off your company and your category strategies. And if all these three things are working in unison, you create this really nice data flywheel where you've committed to the right metrics. You can measure those metrics. You can measure product usage. You can actually understand, are we working well and sustainably as a company that's not just going to go out of business here? So anyway, shout out to Category Pirates. They're the best.
Love that.
Um,
Walkhead will be
the
making his third appearance on my podcast next month.
Nice. Love to hear that. Okay, so you've talked a lot about the data foundation. Getting that right is key to understanding your go-to-market bloat, and B, solving your go-to-market bloat. And this is something I'm super excited about. You launched, I think it was last week, Demand GPT. What is that, and what should the audience go do?
Yeah, so Demand GPT is the first thing that I've seen that takes a niche LLM trained on all the learnings that we've had at Refine Labs over the past 5 years, 100 or 450,000 collective hours of demand gen marketers working with over 200 B2B companies, contributed by more than 100 experts in demand gen like Sam Keenlay and Ashley Lewin and Sydney Waterfall and myself, Tara Panu and many others. And what you can do is be able to search anything. What are the right metrics for my LinkedIn ads? How do I forecast my revenue for next year? What should I present at my marketing QBR? What creative should I make for connected TV ads? What's the best way to optimize my Reddit ads, and hit enter? And you're going to get answers not based on whatever AI can find in Google, but specifically trained around the information that we've collected, proprietary information over the past 5 years. You're going to get much more specific answers. So no longer do you need to trust a random LinkedIn post that you see or a random blog that you read in Google. You can get proven answers by the best in demand gen. I think it's going to fundamentally change how demand gen marketers are able to make decisions more quickly and optimize around the right things, and stop doing this trial and error of try, think, fail, try, think, fail, try, think, fail, and just short circuit them right to the right answer. And today, I think it's really important to note that information has become a total commodity. So as a consumer of information, it's not just about how do I go find an answer, it's about how do I find the right answer for me. I think we need to have a lot more scrutiny over which information we trust and the source of information that we trust. And so with Demand GPT, you can log in, try it out. There's a coupon code Chris15 that you can use to get your 15% off your entire subscription for your lifetime. That's valid until May 15th. So feel free to go and check it out. You can try it. It's a month-to-month agreement. So you can try it out for a month, see how you like it, try out the GPT feature for either yourself or for your entire marketing team or a portion of your marketing team. So feel free to check it out. We'd love your feedback too. Once you try it, feel free to shoot me a DM on LinkedIn and let me know what you think.
Good stuff, Chris. I just shared the link in the chat, and we also have a little pop-up here with the discount code that Chris mentioned. And that's all the time we have today, Chris. Thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time.
Kyle, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to see you, man. Wishing you well with Copy.ai and everything else you're doing.
Likewise, my friend. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. See ya.
I know.